Hey guys, and welcome back to another YouTube series. In this series, we're gonna use the weather API again. What we used last time is darksky.net. That's the first thing we can actually do. Just go to darksky.net. Go ahead and click on the darksky API, and you can try it for free if you don't have an account. I already have one, so I'll just log into it. And then what we're gonna need is pretty much just this URL right here. You're not going to be able to use this same exact one because this secret key is mine, and obviously I'm going to reset it by the time I post up this video. In general, keep your secret key secret, and it's not a big deal. This API does 1,000 free calls a day or a month, I believe. I'm not sure. 1,000 free calls a day or a month enough for this. There you go, 1,000 calls per day. It's more than enough for this YouTube tutorial. What we're gonna do is use this API to get the weather info. It's gonna look something like this. We're gonna get the information that we want. We're not gonna even really display it in our app. We'll do it just for testing purposes, but the main point of this tutorial is to show you how easy it is to take something that you would do for your iOS application, like make an HTTP request to an API, get back information, and display it on your screen. How easy it is to use that same exact information to display it on an Apple Watch. We're going to do this all in XCode. We're going to do it in the simulator. You don't need any kind of extra tools or anything. So just go ahead and open up XCode. Mine actually opened on my other screen here. Let me bring it up. It's popped it up here. Sorry about that. So we're just gonna do start a new project. We're gonna do single view application. There's the option to do iOS app with the WatchKit API, with the WatchKit app already inside. I'm going to show you how to do it if you already had an app established, or you didn't do that from the start. It's not much different. We'll call this weather tutorial. Go ahead and click next. You can have all these unchecked and make sure your language is Swift. Go ahead and click create wherever you want the folder to be for this tutorial. And then just because of organization's sake, let's make a folder for controllers. Let's make another folder for models, and let's make another one for views. Most of you are probably familiar. I'm doing this because I'm following MVC pattern. But you don't have to. That's kind of what's typically used for iOS applications, and that's just what I'm used to, so that's what I use. So throw this in controllers. We could throw all this other stuff, I guess, in views, but we'll just leave it alone for now. What we mainly need is to make our class that's going to be calling and getting the weather. So we're going to make a new class. It's going to be a Swift file. We can call it whatever we want. I'm just going to call it, say, weather fetcher, something like that. Let that load up, and I'm going to say class weather fetcher. It's going to have one method. It's going to be a function that says, say, get current weather. So get current weather is just going to simply make a HTTP request to that URL that I was just looking at. It's going to return a JSON. One thing I'm going to show in this video that I started using with Swift 4 is JSON Decoder. It's just a lot easier way to parse JSON when you get it from a web call. So the first thing we're going to do is convert our string into a URL. To do that, I'm going to use a guard statement. So this is gonna, since this URL function that accepts a string, this method returns an optional. You have to use this guard or do an if let to say to unwrap it. Otherwise, you would be forcefully doing it. What we actually need is this API here, but yours will be different. Otherwise, it won't work. Make sure it's different. We're gonna pop it in there. Cool. And then with the guard statement, we have to use as to return in whatever case. So in this case, we'll just return. We'll say the URL was invalid. So the next thing we have to do is just set up our task real quick. This is going to be a simple URL session, shared one, and we're going to be doing data tasks. There's also options to do a download task, but that's more for audio files, video files, something that you might want to get the progress on. What we need is a data task with the URL, which we already set up. We can use the URL that we set up before. You can see that it's unwrapped, and just click enter to set up these completion variables, parameters, and error. Okay, so first things first, I'll just make sure that the data is open. The data is not optional, meaning we got a good response. Otherwise, I'll say if let the error equals the error that was passed back, we'll just for now print a localized description of the error. And then the next thing we want to do is try to use JSON Decoder to parse our JSON. It's pretty easy to do. Just go ahead and say let decoder equal JSON Decoder. And then you would say something like let weather equals try decoder dot decode. You can see that decoder, it specifies that it throws, meaning when it fails in a way that you have to specifically account for it. We're going to do that. We also need this protocol that we don't have yet, which I'll explain if you haven't seen before, and then we just pass in this data that we already unwrapped here. This should complain. It might not do it right away, but what we actually need to do is have a do. Pop that inside of a do. So essentially we're saying do, try to do this. If it fails, try to do it nicely. Catch let error as ns error. Cool. And in that case too, we'll just print out the localized description. That gives you usually a pretty good readable description, and it accounts for your local language. Okay, so we need a decodable type, which is our weather. We could put this into a different model. We can have a struct that has all this thing, has our like weather variables, but I'm just going to throw it up here. Just for the sake of the shortest video, this is not so much how to code an iOS as far as it is how to get information from your iOS app onto your watch. So for that, I'm just going to say, I'm going to call this a weather response. You'll see why I'm doing that in a second. And we're also going to give it a type of codable, which if you can see, it's decodable and encodable. You could also specify that it's decodable or encodable, but it doesn't hurt. We're not going to encode anything, but we can just have it in there. The reason why I'm calling this weather response rather than weather is kind of subtle. So the way that you would normally parse JSON is you would get this entire thing. You would say that it's a dictionary or a set of values that are usually keys of strings, and the second the value could be anything. So here it's a double, here it's a string, and here it's another dictionary. So normally you would say something like if let whatever the JSON is that I parsed, get this, and then from that get the temperature, make it a double, from that get the humidity, make it a double, from that get the summary, make it whatever you want. So it's obviously doable, kind of tedious, and there's a lot of easy ways to make mistakes. So what we want is this currently. So normally if you were doing codable, if you're using JSON Decoder, you would say something like currently equals is of type, in this case it would be string any. If we try to do that, you'll see that it complains right away. It'll say it doesn't conform to the protocol decodable. The reason why it says that is because, unfortunately, as of now, dictionary is not part of that. So what we need to do instead is say that currently is a struct. We'll call this one weather. This will be also codable. And then instead, we'll say that currently is a type of weather. In this case, since this conforms, even though it has nothing in it, and this conforms, we don't have an issue. And then here we can fill this in by saying weather response dot, and we'll just say self. Here, before I forget, I'll say print weather. So if this doesn't work, because it's a try, it'll fail and it'll print out this error. If it does work, then we'll have a value and it'll print out weather. So what we have to do here, and in general, be very careful. I'll show you what happens if you're not careful. So the way this works is if you have values that are the same name, so if I literally just copy and paste and say variable summary, and I'll say what type it is, string, that'll work. When it's trying to do this decoding, it's going to look for currently, it's going to look for a weather type. The weather type, it's going to look for something called summary, and if it's a string, which it is, then it'll assign it to that value and it'll return that whole object by itself, which is, to me, honestly amazing. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's super fast to do. Same thing with temperature. Make sure it's spelled right, and then we'll get humidity, just like that. And then actually what we'll print out instead is weather dot currently, since that's going to be these values and we don't need to know what this is right here. Let's not forget, since we're in here, to go ahead and say task dot resume. A little weird. I always thought it was a little weird. I used to always use Alamifier and libraries like that for my networking. I always thought it was a little strange that you would set up a task and then afterwards you would call resume to make it instead of like task.download or something like that. But anyways, this is how you call it. For us to use this at all, I have to do this on view did load or somewhere else, but we're going to do it on view did load right now. So I'll say let fetcher equals weather fetcher dot get current weather, and I'm going to select iPhone 6. And if you're paying attention, you might have a guess of whether this is going to work or not. Either way, you might not know what the print statement will say. Signing product, build succeeded. Hopefully it pops up on the right screen. Took a second there and it went on the wrong screen, but it launched. We got our print statement. Not the one we wanted. The data couldn't be read because it is missing. Now, I've gotten this error for a long time ago. The first time I got it was extremely confusing. I was looking at the API. I was like, maybe the API is down. What's going on? Why is the data not available? That was essentially like a bad response. What I saw eventually, which somebody might have noticed, is here. This is spelled wrong. There's only one T in humidity. And that's literally the only difference between it saying data can be read because it's missing and instead saying we have an issue with one of your variables. Now, in general, when you would normally parse JSON, you would do like iflets on every one, so you would get most of the values, but you might be missing one if it's not unwrapped correctly or if you guessed wrong. So this is a little bit tedious because you have to be very careful about making sure these names are correct. But if you get them right, you'll get something just like this. And so we already have a weather object, and it's, you know, we got our summary, our temperature, our humidity, and then we can like clamp these values down or add more. And then just to show you one more thing, which is kind of cool. Let me see if I remember what it is. I believe it's enum coding keys, which is of type string, and coding key, I believe. Something like this. Something like this. That might be right. You might be wondering what this is. In this case, humidity, temperature, summary, all reasonable names for things. Some of the ones are a little bit longer, like apparent temperature. Maybe you'd want to say app temp. In this case, it would seem like you wouldn't be able to do that. The way you would do that if you needed to is that you can go down here in this enum and you can say, we don't have to do anything about summary, so we can skip that. We can say case temp, I'll say is temperature, and then case humidity. So this is one thing, because it is an enum, you have to account for every case, every variable, even if you're not going to do anything with it. And then what this is essentially going to do is say that this is called temp, and this is called temp, but in the JSON that we're going to return, it's actually spelled temperature. So look for that, but we still want it to be called temp. And then, unless I did this wrong, it should work. So that's just how this is how you handle, you know, maybe a variable. One of these is returns with like an underscore that you don't want your variable to be that long or spelled the way it is or whatever it is. So this is how you do it. You list out all the cases, and then for that specific one that you want to account for, you just mention it. And if you see here, our response now is called temp rather than temperature, and it works just fine. I'll see you in the next video. We'll throw this up on the screen just to make sure it's working fine. We'll clamp these values down, and then we'll hook up the watch app and, you know, mostly work with formatting and see how the main thing that differs for iOS development, Apple Watch development, is that the way you can design the UI is a lot more limited, and obviously you have a lot less space, but it's pretty simple. I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you like what's going on. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.